Hey there, fellow trainers. Have you ever had an encounter and thought to yourself, should I catch this one, or should I pass? Or perhaps you're merely wondering which encounters are the most desirable and where to find them. Well, today, we're going to give you those answers as we review the various Pokemon that can be found within Routes 32 and 33, the serene Azalea Town, the labyrinthine depths of Union Cave, and the dreary seclusion of the Slowpoke Well. So come, join us on a journey through the Johto region the likes of which will never occur again. Departing the ruins of Alph, we make our way onto the open fields, rolling hills, and deep sparkling blue ocean waters that comprise the landscape of Route 32. Now, before we can make our way into the dense foliage and tall grass that marks the beginnings of Route 32 proper, we'll be stopped by a lone traveler, who'll congratulate us on our defeat of Falkner and gift us with the held item Miracle Seed, which in Generation 2 boosts the attack power of grass-type moves by 10%. With the Miracle Seed firmly in hand, we finally venture forth into the wilderness of Route 32. Amidst the tall grass, during the early hours of the morning and into the afternoon, we can find the following Pokemon: Ekans, Rattata, Pidgey, Bellsprout, and Hoppip. However, if we wait a while, during the late hours of the evening, we'll instead find wild Ekans, Rattatas, Whoopers, Ghastlies, Hoothoots, Zubats, and Bellsprouts roaming amongst the dense foliage. Later, once we've acquired access to the move Headbutt, the smaller trees on this route will become yet another source of wild Pokemon. Hiding high up in the treetops during all hours of the day, we'll find wild Hoothoots, Exeggcutes, Ekans, and, on certain special occasions, Pinecos. Similarly, the waters of this route, though currently inaccessible to us, likewise hold a few Pokemon worthy of note. If we return here with the HM Surf and a fishing rod, we'll be able to catch the following water-dwelling Pokemon during all hours of the day: Tentacool, Tentacruel, Quagsire, Magikarp, and, during certain special occasions, the ever-elusive Qwilfish. Now, out of all the Pokemon that dwell on this route, there are 7 that we've never encountered prior. Specifically, Ekans, Exeggcute, Pineco, Tentacool, Tentacruel, Magikarp, and Qwilfish. So let's start by taking a closer look at the poisonous snake Pokemon, Ekans. Starting from the top, we can clearly see that Ekans has a predilection towards physical attacks, with average defensive bulk having a base HP of 35, a base defense of 44, and a base special defense of 54. Its durability is fairly middle of the road. Where it truly stands out, however, is with its offensive stats, with a base attack of 60, a base special attack of 40, and a base speed of 55. It's reasonably fast and powerful for this stage of the game. These aspects are only improved upon when it evolves into Arbok at level 22. At first glance, it gains notable defensive bulk with this evolution. Possessing a base HP of 60, a base defense of 69, and a base special defense of 79, it's fairly tanky for an early game Pokemon. Once again, however, its true strength lies in its offensive stats, with a base attack of 85, a base special attack of 65, and a base speed of 80, it's both fast and powerful. Now I know what you're thinking. Doesn't Arbok have a base attack of 95? Well, in Generation 2, this was not the case. In fact, from Generations 1 to 6, Arbok had a base attack of 85. It wasn't until Generation 7 that Arbok's base attack stat was buffed to 95. However, in my opinion, a 10-point boost is fairly negligible and doesn't affect my overall view of this Pokemon. Now, with all that said, I do consider this a Pokemon worth catching, but its usefulness will definitely be exhausted by the mid-game, as superior options begin to crop up. Moving on to a more familiar Pokemon, namely Exeggcute, we'll notice a few subtle changes. Looking at the base stats of Exeggcute, it's clear not much has changed from the last time we inspected this Pokemon, all the way back in the Kanto region. It still has considerable defensive bulk with a base HP of 60, a base defense of 80, and a base special defense of 45. Offensively, it's still fairly average, with a base attack of 40, a base special attack of 60, and a base speed of 40. However, when exposed to a Leaf Stone, it evolves into Exeggutor. With the separation of the special stat into its composites of special attack and special defense, came some drastic changes to Exeggutor's defensive capabilities. No longer did it have absurdly high special defenses, as, with the split, its base special defense dropped to a value of 65. Despite this setback, it retains decent defensive bulk, with a base HP of 95 and a base defense of 85. Offensively, it's still fairly powerful, with a base attack of 95 and a base special attack of 125. Sadly, this Pokemon's potential is still held back by its mediocre base speed stat of 55. Now, in Generation 1, I would have recommended using this Pokemon. Unfortunately, with the changes that came with Generation 2, I can no longer do so. It's not a terrible Pokemon, but it's far outclassed by other options, so I suggest that you pass on this one. Now, let's move on to Pineco. Looking at the base stats of Pineco, it's clearly a physically defensive Pokemon. With a base HP of 50, a base defense of 90, and a base special defense of 35, it can stonewall most physical sweepers, but must be wary of special attacks. Offensively, it's fairly average, having a base attack of 65 and a base special attack of 35. The flaw of this Pokemon, however, is in its base speed stat, which has a meager value of only 15. But perhaps this is improved upon its evolution to Forretress at level 31. Let's take a look and find out. At first glance, it becomes obvious that all of its stats see a significant boost upon evolution into Forretress. With a base HP of 75, a base defense of 140, and a base special defense of 60, it can handle special attacks far better, but should still be wary of them. Offensively, it also sees improvements, with a base attack of 90 and a base special attack of 60. Speed, sadly, still remains a sticking point for this Pokemon though. However, I don't think that its abysmal base speed is truly to its detriment. With its available learn set, it's best suited to being a physical wall and utility Pokemon. In either case, having high base speed is a boon, but not a necessity when fulfilling those roles. So overall, I'd say this Pokemon could be useful, and is worth your consideration. Ideally, you would breed this Pokemon so that it would learn the move Pin Missile as an egg move, leaving you with the move set of Pin Missile, Rapid Spin, either Explosion or Curse, and finally Spikes. As for Tentacool, Tentacruel, Magikarp, and its evolved form Gyarados, I've discussed them sufficiently during our excursion through the Kanto region's various encounters. With nothing new to be said about them in Generation 2, I see no need to beleaguer the point with needless review. That being said, if you're interested in my opinions on these Pokemon, I refer you to my video From Cerulean to Vermilion and Beyond Evaluating Pokemon, which you can find by clicking the card that appears on the upper right-hand side of the screen. Now, with that out of the way, let's take a look at Qwilfish. Looking at its base stats, it's clearly more suited to physical attacks, though special attacks aren't completely useless to it, and it is notably agile. Sadly, since we only gain access to it during special occasions until the mid to late game, having a base attack of 95, a base special attack of 55, and a base speed of 85 makes it fairly average, if not mediocre. But let's not count Qwilfish out just yet, and take a look at its learn set. As we can clearly see, it has access to a wide variety via level up, with most of them being physical moves, and a notable assortment learned via TM and HM. Overall, if you get access to it in the early game, it can be fairly powerful. Come the mid or late game, when you can catch it more easily, it will be far outclassed by the alternatives. In the event you do use this Pokemon past the early game, I would advise the following moveset: Hydro Pump, Sludge Bomb, Headbutt, and Toxic. This moveset will provide you with 2 stab moves, a flinch move, and a debilitating status ailment, allowing you to make the most of this Pokemon's strengths. With nothing else to be gained from lingering on Route 32, we make our way through a gaping maw in the side of the mountains, and enter the subterranean cavern system known as Union Cave. Within this 3-floor maze of tunnels, we'll find a wide assortment of Pokemon. On the first floor, during all hours of the day, we can find wild Rattatas, Geodudes, Zubats, Woopers, Quagsires, Goldines, Seekings, Magikarps, and Onix, wandering in the dimly lit cavern or lurking in the depths of the waters. However, if we venture here during the morning or afternoon, we can also find, amidst the previously mentioned Pokemon, wild Sandshrews roaming the tunnels. Out of all of these encounters, we have 4 new Pokemon, all of which we've never seen in the Johto region before, namely Sandshrew, Geodude, Goldeen, and Seeking. But seeing as we've discussed Goldeen and Seeking during our escapades through the Kanto region, I'll refer you once again to my From Cerulean to Vermilion and Beyond Evaluating Pokemon video, as I have nothing new to add about them that wasn't already covered there. So with that being said, let's take a closer look at everyone's favorite pangolin-inspired Pokemon, Sandshrew. With a base HP of 50, a base defense of 85, and a base special defense of 30, Sandshrew is fairly bulky and durable. Its true strength, however, lies in its offensive stats, as Sandshrew possesses a base attack of 75, a base special attack of 20, and a base speed of 40. These base stats allow it to outrun most other Pokemon of its type, and deal significant damage with its physical attacks. However, these aspects are only further improved upon when it evolves at level 22 into Sandslash. Sandslash is a behemoth of a Pokemon. With a steady base speed of 65, it's the second fastest pure ground-type Pokemon in the game, being beaten only by the likes of Dugtrio. Sandslash also boasts improved attack and special attack, with values of 100 and 45 respectively. It also has increased defensive bulk, with a base HP of 75, a base defense of 110, and a base special defense of 55. Overall, I consider this a Pokemon worth catching. However, I do feel that it will truly shine during the early to mid game, as there are far better options available in the late game. Finally, let's look at Geodude, as well as its evolved forms, Graveler and Golem. Now, it should be noted that these Pokemon are still the bulky physical walls that they were when I reviewed them in the past, during our jaunt through the Kanto region. However, during that time, I erroneously stated that Golem had a base attack of 120. Upon double-checking my information, though, it turns out that from Generation 1 to Generation 6, Golem had a base attack of 110. It was only from Generation 7 onwards that it was buffed to a value of 120. I don't necessarily have anything new to add on these Pokemon that I haven't covered in the Kanto region, but I wanted to correct that one bit of erroneous information. Moving onwards, as we descend deeper into the labyrinth of tunnels, on the bottommost floor, we'll come across a lone Lapras, as well as wild Krabbies, Kinglers, Staryus, and Corsolas, wading through the deep waters of the cavern. So, first things first, let's take a look at the Coral-inspired Pokemon, namely Corsola. Upon looking at the base stats, it's clear that this is a defensive Pokemon. With a base HP of 55, a base defense of 85, and a base special defense of 85, Corsola is fairly tanky. Offensively, however, it's rather mediocre, with a stunningly average base attack of 55, a base special attack of 65, and a base speed of 35. Corsola would not win any awards with these kinds of stats, and is not noteworthy for its typing. In fact, in terms of type matchups, it's only slightly better than a Pokemon like Golem, which is a rock and ground type Pokemon. Overall, I'd suggest skipping this one, as there's really no useful application for it. Now, with regards to Lapras, Krabby, Kingler, Staryu, and its evolved form Starmie, these are Pokemon I've discussed previously in depth when we were in the Kanto region, and I see no need to bog down this video with needless review. So, instead of wasting time, I'll refer you to my From Saffron to Fuchsia and Beyond Evaluating Pokemon video if you want to know more about Lapras. If instead you wanted my perspective on Krabby and Kingler, I'd refer you to my Ruined Power Plants to Pitch Black Caves Evaluating Pokemon video, where I discussed their strengths and weaknesses. However, in the case of Staryu and Starmie, I will instead refer you to the last video we did on the Kanto region, specifically my From Fuchsia to Cinnabar Island and Beyond video, where we discussed in depth my opinions on this Pokemon. With all that said, as we depart the darkness of Union Cave, we'll exit out onto Route 33. Now, Route 33 is a small outlet on the eastern border of Azalea Town. It's comprised of the rocky cliffs of the mountain range, a grassy field, and a dense forest of trees surrounding a well-trodden path leading further west. amidst this panoply, during all hours of the day, we can find copious quantities of Rattatas and Geodudes roaming the landscape, as well as wild Aipom, Spearows, Ekans, and on special occasions, Heracross, hiding in the treetops. Also, during the morning and afternoon, wild Hoppips roam the area alongside the previously mentioned Pokemon. There is, however, one Pokemon that can only be encountered here during the evenings, namely Zubat. But we've discussed Zubat and its evolved form sufficiently in our first video on the Johto region. So instead, let's focus on the 3 new encounters we have for this route, namely Aipom, Spearow, and Heracross. Let's start with my favorite early game flying type Pokemon, Spearow. Upon first glance, it's clearly suited to physical attacks, which is perfect for a Pokemon with the dual typing of flying and normal type. However, with a base HP of 40, a base defense of 30, and a base special defense of 31, it's fairly fragile. Luckily, this lack of defensive bulk is offset by its impressive offensive stats. Due to it having a base attack of 60, it can exploit stab moves for both of its types exceedingly well. With its base speed of 70, however, it's also extremely agile for an early game Pokemon and can outrun most of its competition at this stage of the game. It should be noted, though, that all of this is only improved upon when it evolves into Fearow at level 20. Looking at its base stats, it's clear that its base stats are more, shall we say, well-rounded than those of its predecessor. It boasts improved defensive bulk, with a base HP and base defense of 65, as well as a base special defense of 61, which makes it far less fragile than its prior form, Spearow. Boasting improved defensive stats, with a base attack of 90, a base special attack of 61, and a base speed of 100, it can take even further advantage of stab moves and its repertoire of physical attack moves while outrunning most other Pokemon. But let's take a look at the learn set in question, if only to elaborate on the point. Upon examination, its moves clearly focus on either boosting its already prodigious speed, or taking advantage of stab bonuses. It also has access to one of the strongest, if not the strongest flying type move in the game, Drill Peck. As you can clearly see, with a base attack power of 80 and an accuracy of 100, it's both powerful and accurate. Since it boasts a significant amount of power points, or PP, having exactly 20 points at base value and 32 at maximum value, it can be used a significant amount of times before you need to visit a Pokemon Center to replenish. It should also be noted, since it's a physical attack, that it scales off of the attack stat, which is one of Fearow's strongest offensive stats, allowing it to do significant damage. Overall, I would suggest catching this Pokemon. It's a worthy addition to your roster, and can even have some value beyond the early game if you train it properly. Personally, if you're doing a normal run, I'd suggest breeding it with a Doduo or Dodrio to gain access to Tri-Attack as an egg move. From there, I'd ideally go with the moveset of Drill Peck, Tri-Attack, Steel Wing, and Toxic. If you don't have access to Toxic, however, you can also use either Agility, Mud Slap, or Protect for the final move slot. With that being said, let's move on to this peculiar looking specimen, known only as Aipom. Looking at the base stats, it has some similarities to Spearow. It boasts decent offensive stats, with a base attack of 70, a base special attack of 40, and a base speed of 85, which makes it slightly faster than Spearow and about as strong. Fortunately, it's slightly more durable than the aforementioned Pokemon with a base HP, defense, and special defense of 55. So where's the rub? Well, to answer that, let's take a look at its learn set. Well, this is disappointing. Or is it? Looking at its available repertoire of TM and HM moves, despite the disappointing variety of moves it can learn via level up, it has some decent options at its disposal. The problem is that most of them are only made available by the mid-game, at which point it begins to be severely outclassed. The only useful move of note that it has is Baton Pass. Now I could go on and on about how useful Baton Pass is, as well as the various strategies based on it, but we'd be here all day. So instead, I'm going to cut to the chase and move on to my verdict for this Pokemon. Overall, I think it's hot garbage and not worth catching. You may disagree, and you're perfectly entitled to your opinion, but you'd be hard-pressed to convince me of its worth in Generation 2. Now then, it's about time we discuss everyone's favorite Rhinoceros Beetle-inspired Pokemon, Heracross. Already, we can see this Pokemon has impressive and well-rounded base stats, with a base HP of 80, a base defense of 75, and a base special defense of 95. It's fairly tanky. However, it also boasts extremely impressive offensive stats, with a base attack of 125, a base special attack of 40, and a base speed of 85. Normally, this would make it quite powerful at any stage of the game. Sadly, it's marred by its learn set in this generation, which makes it slightly less useful in the long run. However, it should be stated that it's not so bad as to make it useless. It may not have access to any strong fighting type moves, but it does have access to the strongest bug type move in the game, namely Megahorn. Considering how gimped bug types were in Generation 1, this is a significant boon that can't be understated. Overall, I would suggest catching this Pokemon. It's powerful, has access to powerful moves, and has impressive stats to back it all up. However, if I may, I'd personally suggest the moveset of Megahorn, Reversal, Earthquake, and Endure if you plan to use this Pokemon. This will give you significant damage output while making the most of both stab bonuses with its limited repertoire of fighting type moves. At any rate, let's move on, further west along the dirt path, to Azalea Town. Now, Azalea Town is a quaint little village that borders the Ilex Forest to the west and Route 33 to the east. If you have access to Headbutt, during all hours of the day, you can find wild Spearows, Aipoms, Ekans, and on special occasions, Heracross lurking in the treetops. Sadly, with nothing new here, it's time to move on. But before we do, let's take a look around town. There is someone of note who dwells here, in a house on the northwestern part of town. Who is it? Well, if we head inside the home, we'll find it's the dwelling of the Pokeball artisan, known only as Kurt. Normally, you could supply him with apricorns, and he'd make a specialized Pokeball, just for you. However, you may have noticed the presence of some familiar criminals lurking about town. That's right, Team Rocket is back, and they're currently keeping all of the Slowpokes in the village trapped within the Slowpoke Well. This doesn't sit well with Kurt, who almost immediately bolts out the door as we enter his abode, to give them a piece of his mind. This results in both him and the guard tumbling down the open well into the caverns below. Upon following them, we enter a rather spacious subterranean cave system. When I first played this game, I was surprised to find such a large underground cave dwelling beneath the town. Amidst the dimly lit caverns, on the uppermost floor, we can find wild Zubats, Slowpokes, Goldines, Seekings, and Magikarps during all hours of the day. If, however, we venture further in, to the lowest level of the cavern, we can instead find wild Zubats and Golbats hanging from the ceiling. Beyond that, we'll also find, within the depths of the waters, wild Slowpokes, Slowbros, Goldines, Seekings, and Magikarps swimming about in the flooded section of the Slowpoke Well. Now, we've covered all of these Pokemon at some point in the past, but there is a new evolution for Slowpoke that was introduced in Generation 2. If we trade Slowpoke while it's holding a King's Rock, it'll evolve into Slowking. With a base HP of 95, a base defense of 80, and a base special defense of 110, it's exceptionally bulky and can tank quite a few hits. Slowking also boasts impressive offensive stats, with a base attack of 75 and a base special attack of 100. So where's the problem? Well, if you haven't noticed it already, its base speed has a pathetic value of only 30. This means it truly lives up to its name. It is the Slow King. Does this mean you should pass on this Pokemon? Absolutely not. It may be slow as molasses, but it's still extremely powerful. But perhaps I'm biased. Overall, I'd suggest catching Slowpoke and evolving it to your choice of Slowbro or Slowking. While either one is perfectly viable, I definitely have a preference for Slowking. Now, if you have any strategies, tips, or ideas relating to any of the encounters thus far that I didn't mention, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Your input is always welcome here. And with that, we're all out of time for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more exciting content. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.